Hey, welcome back to Lovin Sheila, the podcast. Here we are. It's almost April. We've almost made it through a full quarter of 2024, and time has certainly been flying. The older I get, it seems like the quicker time goes. But happy to be back with you today. I have a lot to say. I've really been focusing on, I guess, living, and that's why I haven't sat down with you for any long periods of time and had a real full length podcast. But today has been a great day. We're finishing up this quarter, just kind of winding down, and I have some things that I want to share with you. Today's been a real easy day, so I took some time to start looking at maybe binge watching something, and I stumbled across a show called Black Love. And I guess it's an experiment where they take these women for 10 weeks and they just kind of give them some instructions on how to date and how to be open to fall in love and things like that. And I found it kind of interesting. It grabbed my attention just because there are women in different phases of their life. Some recently divorced, some separated, some young and single, some just single. And so some control freaks and whatnot. So I was looking to see where I fit into this. And I was, as always, looking for inspiration. So I kind of watched it and I took notes, and I just really was just trying to see what I can learn because they had a therapist. And certainly anytime there's therapy involved, I'm interested. And so one of the things that he was saying to the ladies is determine what you need, and also determine what you need versus what you want. And I think that's significant because even in my line of work, when we're negotiating and we're talking about, there's many ways to feel a need, but wants are very specific. Meaning, if I want a Louis Vuitton bag, I want a Louis Vuitton bag. There's no substitute, and I'm certainly that way. So we need to really figure out furthermore, deeper than what we want. What do we really need? And that registers with me because that's where I am in my life. I have went through my life prior to this stage, and I really focused on the things that I wanted. And I realized that a lot of the things that I wanted, I was able to gain. I was able to achieve it. But in the process of getting what you want, are you truly happy? That's the question. You can have nice homes, nice cars, the best of practically everything. And yet, if you have all that and you fulfilled your wants, do you have happiness, or do you have what you need? And so you might have moments of happiness and fleeting happiness, certainly, but a sustained peace and happiness. So I think I agree with him that it's very important to determine what you want versus what you need. And here at this stage in my life, I'm really focused on what I need. And I think that is important for all of us to make sure that we're getting our basic needs, even our basic needs, instead of just, I want this and I want this, because that stuff comes and goes. I mean, it's a trend, it's whatever's hot at the moment. But if you sit with yourself and you have some awareness and self-discovery, which that's another thing he said, the whole process is about self-discovery. And that's something that I learned, and it may have taken me a long time, 40 years or so, to learn that and to be in tune with myself and go through the whole self-discovery. But part of discerning between your wants and your needs is having some self-discovery, which ultimately comes out as self-awareness. And, I may have mentioned to you all months ago that after all these years, recently, in the last year, I just realized I like tacos a lot. And it's interesting to me because all my life I've been eating it and enjoying it and all this other stuff, but I never embraced the fact this is what I like. This is big part of me, and it's so simple, but it just goes to show that there's so many things that are in us that we don't have the awareness of, and we just do it, but we don't appreciate who we are. And just getting to who we are is important. So I appreciate him walking the ladies through through dating, and determining what they want versus what they need, leading them to more self-discovery, because really this is what we all need. I mean, how can we walk in this life without discovering who we are, what we want, what we love, what we don't like, what we don't want in our life? So it's very important. And so I found some inspiration in watching this. I'm about 5 shows in, and it's old. It's from 2015, but I'm about 5 shows in, and enjoying it. I'm watching it here and there, and along with that, I always watch Love Is Blind, and it's interesting to me that how your vision changes once you're in a different state. Because when I first started watching, I was a married woman, and my perspective, it really changes versus being single and married. I was so cynical. I just could not relate. I was just like, why are they acting like this? Why are they so emotional? And then being in a state where everything is new again, and you do have to meet new people, and you have to learn people and discover people, then I realized, oh, that's why they're acting like that. Because if you enter into it in a vulnerable state, you're going to have emotions. Things are going to be raw. And I found that I am very raw. And though I feel like I'm evolving and I'm in a good place, I've noticed that, as I mentioned in my shorts, there are times when I'm triggered. There are times when I can go back into, things that hurt me, or things that were bothersome to me, or wondering why I did this and why I tolerated that, or whatever the case may be. So I'm going on a good path, but at the same time, as I mentioned, there are little potholes, different things that take me back to different points in my life where maybe I wasn't happy, or maybe something happened that disturbed me. And so it's now I can identify, because now here I am being that raw and that vulnerable person. And so I just wanted to kind of confess, because I was hard on all these shows. Last year, when I talked about Harlem, I was hard on the women when they were dating. In Love Is Blind, I was cynical when I talked about that on She Will. But now, just being in a different place, I have a little bit more understanding, because I know the different things that I have experienced, and the different emotions that I have experienced, and the times that I cried, and the times that I was vulnerable or sad or confused, all those things. So I guess this is just me apologizing for that. But, you have to be in different situations, you can understand. And now I can understand as a single woman. Before, I understood as a married woman. And so, we evolve. And so this is where we are now. So that's just kind of catching up, because it's been a while since we did this. All right. So I'm using April as pretty much a relaunch of my self-care. And, I talked about self-care as really taking care of our emotional and our mental and our physical, all that all together. And I wanted to get away from self-care in terms of just thinking about our massages and getting our nails done and our hair done and getting facials and things like that, beautification, as I referred to it. But I'm going to use April because I've been doing a lot of self-care in forms of therapy and, Dr. Cloud, and thinking and philosophizing with my friends and so forth, and analyzing things, and sitting here with you and talking through different things. And so I'm going to use April just to get back in touch with some of the things I do for care, skincare, hair, physical fitness, working on my diet, all those things, just trying to make sure that I continue to be strong in every area of my life, so that not only that I'm mentally and emotionally strong and taking care of my well-being, but that I'm taking care of my health and things like that. So that's what April is for me. I'm a little excited for it, and I'm concerned because I'm sure I'm going to have to sacrifice some things. But another thing along my self-discovery, I know that I'm more disciplined than I give myself credit for. And so I trust that I will be able to discipline myself to do the things that I intend to do during my April boot camp. And I intend to come to you with a lot more shorts during that period. I'm totally enjoying my shorts. It's so easy to do. But sometimes I feel like they are not complete thoughts, like I'm not examining them or I'm not putting it all together like I like to do here. And so I'm going to go back a little bit because I started my shorts with loneliness. And when I was talking about loneliness, I wasn't referring to just, being alone, not having anyone to talk to. It wasn't that. It wasn't that you have nobody. It's just that the lack of feeling a connection to things. I said you could be married and still feel lonely if you feel like you're doing things on your own. You feel lonely if you feel like you don't have the support you need, or there's not the backing to get things done, or you're not on the same page, or you're not on one accord. You can feel lonely. And so that was the sense that I was referring to loneliness. I just recall I listened to Bishop Jakes years ago, and he said you could be in a room full of people and still feel lonely. And you feel lonely because you're with people that you have no covenant with, no relationship with, no connection with. And so I wanted to focus on that because I know it happens to a lot of people, and we just need to find a way out of it. And I think part of that goes back to self-discovery. When you recognize it, you can play the part, you can pretend like all is well in your life and everything is wonderful and just, disconnect from your feelings. Or you can be aware, like, this is not real. I'm not feeling connected. I need to get connected to something because it feels like I'm going through the motions. And that's what we don't want to do. We don't want to go through the motions. So that's what I meant when I was talking about loneliness. And then I went to a place of abandonment and rejection because for me, I never really felt abandoned or rejected. I always felt like it was a part of everything. It seems like everything goes back to the way we were raised. And I know when I started therapy, like early in my 30s, my therapist, she said to me, she took me back to my inner child, and she asked me different times, what does little Sheila want? And so I realized that a lot of things go back to our childhood. So I don't know why I mentioned that. But anyway, abandonment and rejection. I didn't feel abandoned or rejected necessarily in my childhood. I will say I felt a longing though for security. And I don't know, maybe that's just the way that I'm built, because I think that has gone throughout my life. I've always searched for security. And yeah, you would think that would be the opposite of someone being abandoned or rejected. Security. I have not traced that to any abandonment, but I do know that there's certainly a need for security. And I've searched and longed and tried to put my feet on that for all my life. When I found a career, I stuck with it for the last 30 something years. I found a husband, we stayed together for 20 something years. Because that was security for me. I always had my relationship. I always had a source of income. So I was loyal to that. And, because I loved my husband, and my job paid my bills, or helped me with pay my bills. But at the same time, when you're doing that, you need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And even when you love someone or someone loves you, sometimes you can be missing each other, really not connected and loving each other the way they need to be loved. And so that could cause a disconnection. And that can also allow you to feel abandoned or rejected, because whatever that need is inside of you is not being met. no one can see it in you. And so as a result, you feel rejected. And it's not because they don't love you, it's just that they're not able to meet that need, or maybe you're not even, and I used to say, I'm not even able to, maybe I can't communicate it. Maybe I don't know how to communicate what I need. At any rate, it can cause you to feel abandoned or rejected. When you're not receiving what you need, or if you feel like you're in something alone, or if you don't see eye to eye on how you're raising your children, or whatever the case may be, and you have to take that journey alone, you can feel rejected. So that's why I was talking about that. And then I kind of got to the point where I was talking about love, and now I'm changing my view of love because I'm seeing it in so many different ways. And we always evaluated our love languages, and mine was acts of service and words of affirmation. And as I've gone on this journey, I've realized how true it is, because the one that struck me the most is words of affirmation, because along the journey I realized how much it, for me, unknowingly so, how important words of affirmation are. And they come across for me as reassurance. And I know that you cannot be in a relationship with someone and ask that they reassure you every day and tell you something. I got you every day, and I love you. I mean, I guess you could say I love you every day, but just constantly making sure that that person knows you're not going anywhere. Like, I wouldn't want to be with someone who is constantly requiring that of me. It's exhausting, I'm sure. But at the same time, I realized I require a lot of reassurance, and so that was something that I learned about me, and that was something that I talked about in therapy, because I was exhausting myself. I was exhausting myself. And so, I wanted to dig deeper, because that's what we've been doing. That's what we do in therapy. We try and dig deeper. And I talked about self-awareness and self-discovery. And so that was something I discovered about myself. And so I wanted to understand it better and figure out ways to cope, because all these things come back to me. We cannot ask someone else to fill the needs in making us happy. Of course, whomever you're involved with, of course, that's their desire. They want to please you. They want to make you happy. But at the same time, there's some ownership that we have to take for our lives, for our happiness, for our situations, and for understanding who we are. And some things might be, I think, could be too much to ask of others. There's some things that we have to handle ourselves. And so me understanding what this need was, what this requirement was for reassurance, and understanding that I have the ability to reassure myself, to encourage myself, to minister to myself, to remind myself of the things that I already know that have been expressed to me. And that's what we all can do. So even in that same message I just told you about with Bishop Jakes, where he talked about being lonely, he also talked about, you need to be able to encourage yourself. And so in therapy, I was sharing with my therapist, and I told her how I was feeling, and how I need all this reassurance. And she reminded me that I could reassure myself. And it's not rocket science. It's just all the things that we talk about in therapy, they're never rocket science. It's like something that's right there on the surface, but somehow I missed it because I was probably going too deep or overthinking the situation, and we just kind of we simplified it. And so, we talked about it. She says, you can reassure yourself, Sheila, you know this and you know that and all this other stuff. So there it is. And so, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. And I can't say that I'm not still challenged sometimes and occasionally, but I do now have, I have the tools to help myself through it, because I'm trying to be self-aware as well as have some self-sufficiency, because though I said I'm entering my soft girl era, at the same time I can't lose all of the strength that I've developed over the years. And so I am needing to make sure that I use all these tools to help me through. And so I want to encourage you, if you're like me, if you have all the information you need, if the declarations have been made to you, hold on to them. Don't lose it. Don't lose sight of that over some simple um, miscommunication or lack of reiteration or whatever. Just know what you know, and reassure yourself. And those words of affirmation don't have to come from others. They can come from you. You can affirm yourself. And so, and then the other was acts of service. And I've received some acts of service that literally blew my mind. Like, I was in awe. I just could not believe it. And it taught me how someone, another message I listened to years ago, how God wants to love you through someone. And I got to see someone love on me through their acts of service, not even directed at me, but or towards me, but just in my circle. And it was just, wow, it was overwhelming for me. It was absolutely overwhelming to me. So I just changed the way I viewed love, and it has expanded. And so as we evolve, things have to, we would hope they expand. And as I grow older, I would hope that I get a better understanding. And so my views on love and relationships and partnerships and things like that have been changing. At the same time, I realize, timing is important. And I talked about people's capacity for love. You can't change a racehorse or jackass into a racehorse. You can't. It has to be in them. It has to be a desire. They have to have done the work. I have to do the work. Whomever we're dealing with, they have to do the work, so that you come together and you're two evolved people who are ready. And that's why timing is important, because we have to grow, we have to mature, we have to be capable of love, we have to want to love, we have to desire it, we have to want to care for a person, and understand that you don't care for every person the same way. You do another person, and we all have different needs. And just like when you have children, multiple children, you can't do the same thing necessarily for Johnny as you do for Tommy, because your children are different. You have to raise them different. You have to speak to them different, because they don't have the same personalities. The same thing doesn't make them click. Just like the same thing in relationships. You have to study the person and get an understanding of who they are and how they respond and how they operate, so that you can love them properly. You can't love them like you want to be loved. You have to study them and see how they tick, and love them accordingly, if that's what's in your heart. And then, like Usher said, you can't make them pay for another man's mistakes. And so that's what I talked about, triggers and trauma, meaning if something seems eerily familiar and it triggers you and takes you back, and you want to deal with them the way you dealt with other people in your life, you have to remember it's brand new. It's new, and you have to teach someone how to love you. You have to communicate and express yourself so they understand where you've been, what your traumas are, what your triggers are, or what your trauma responses are, what your triggers are. And if you share with them, and if you're open and you're vulnerable and they're sensitive and they love you, then they'll deal with you the way, in an appropriate way. And that will help you to avoid those triggers and traumas, and steer clear of them, and kind of heal and be whole, and having a good open relationship. And so those are some things that I covered in our shorts, and I just gave you an overview of it, because I felt like all those things were tying together, and I did not fully elaborate on how they work together, but I hope you can see it. I hope that the shorts helped you along the way. They helped me just getting those things off my chest, as I enter into this new place in my life, as this new place in my life. Those are some of the things that I have to take with me, and to encourage me and to strengthen me. And as I go into, my soft girl era, These are the things that I've learned, and learning how to follow, learning how to trust, all the things that I talked about in previous Lovin Sheilas. Trust is so important, and putting your guard down. I was doing my Dr. Cloud, and we were talking about, as always, boundaries. It's all about boundaries, and boundaries being that line, that of demarcation of where you end and where another person begins, and making sure that we respect one another, because that is so important. Like we always said, boundaries are not to put a wall. It's not a wall, because walls are when we're guarded. Walls come from hurt. Walls are like fortifications, moats that they build around castles in medieval times and all that kind of stuff. We don't want walls, because walls are impenetrable. We don't want a wall. We want to have a clear understanding, communication, where folks can reach us and we're reachable, we're touchable. So boundaries are healthy lines, not walls, but healthy lines where people know not to go any further, to mutual respect. So Dr. Cloud is always talking about boundaries. It's all about boundaries. So now I'm studying boundaries in relationships, and really, what did he say? I can't recall, but I will tell you this. One of the things that I struggle with, as I talked about being reassured, and I never thought I was particularly sensitive, but we covered this in therapy. Sometimes you could be around a person and they're not as expressive, or they're quiet, and people like me who tend to read energies, and we're empaths, or we're always hypersensitive, and I think it's due to trauma and dealing with emotional people. But I zone in on that, and I'm like, okay, what's wrong? What's the problem? And I get sensitive, and I take it. What I found in therapy, we talked about it, and I take it personal. Why are you so quiet today? What's going on? Or what's the deal? Like, I may not say it, but in my mind, I take it personal, and I unfortunately have noticed that I have a wall, and I change my posture, and I get a little more rigid and a little more distant. And so that's something, like this, we're all discovering who we are. We're all discovering how we respond in different situations. And I noticed this about me. I became a little more aware of this. And my therapist, she told me what I told you before. We talked about reassuring ourselves, and then we talked about not taking it personal. All these things are not personal. All of us have days when we're not as expressive. All of us have days where we don't want to talk as much. All of us have days when we go into our shell a little bit. It is not a reflection. When I do that, it's not a reflection of anyone that I'm dealing with. That's just how I feel that day, for no apparent reason. It's just how I feel that day. But my relationships are intact. It's just I need a day to recharge my battery, to just sit with myself, or whatever the case may be. And so it's important that we learn that everyone's movement, everyone's attitude on any given day, or I shouldn't say attitude, everyone's disposition on any given day is not a reflection of us. So we need to not take it personal. And I know that's something that I've struggled with. So that's why I wanted to share with you all, because we can be hypersensitive, reading energy nonstop, determining where we sit. And I think a lot of that comes from our trauma. If we've had traumatic relationships, emotionally difficult relationships, we want to manage things and keep everything cool. But if they're not communicating, or they're quiet, they're silent, whatever the case may be, you're thinking something is wrong. What do I need to do to fix it? and basically, you can't fix other people. So bottom line is, don't take it personal. We have to be self-assured and know things are okay. And that takes me to another thing that I've learned over the last couple weeks, I've been looking at attachment styles, and I found myself to be an anxious attachment person, which is troublesome. But I think I'll talk about that in some coming episodes. We'll talk about attachment, because those are things that are learned and in ways that we are, and the ways that we operate in relationships. But because of my being an anxious attachment style, knowing that, again, back to self-discovery and self-awareness, I know that I'm like that. And I'm going to pick up on every little thing in a room. I have to reassure myself and settle myself down. And so if you're like that, like you're like me, remind yourself, you're going to pick up, your antennas are picking up every signal around, but you have to calm yourself. You have to know what you know and be good in that right there. And that's what I learned. And so now here we are. I wanted to say, I'm at the point where, I've been divorced, and I know when you get married, you've signed up for the fairy tale, and you've signed up for the happily ever after. And so now I'm wondering, where's my happily ever after? But, I want to say that I am assured that there is a happily ever after for me. I feel it in my soul. And this is just an encouragement for all of us, things don't always unravel the way we want to, or pan out the way we want to. But if you're doing the work, if you're staying true to yourself, if you're knowing yourself, if you're following your dreams, if you're operating with integrity, you will get your happily ever after. If you trust God, I should have put that first. Trust God. The happily ever after, just because of divorce, it doesn't mean that it will not come. It is still possible. There's a ram in the bush, yet and still there's a ram in the bush. For me, I know there were unexpected things transpiring for me that I did not see coming, in directions I never saw coming, but have definitely started my happily ever after. And I'm in a place of, openness and willingness and excitement for the future, because I'm learning, there's new ways to love, there's new things on the horizon, and happily ever after may not end in what you thought your fairy tale was, but it doesn't mean you can't create your new love story. And that's what we're all about, creating the life we want, creating our happily ever after, and finding the peace and the joy and all that, and loving ourselves through the process. And so Lovin Sheila is discovering Sheila and being aware of Sheila, and knowing, again, the things that are destructive for me, and making sure I avoid those pitfalls, or making sure that when I do fall in those pitfalls, that I learn from it. I check myself, I evaluate my heart and my situation, and know how to go forward from there to get to my happily ever after. So it's not that you'll never fall. It's not that you'll never have a pitfall or pothole or whatever the case may be. It's just that in the process, you're going to grow, and you're going to learn from it, and you're going to become better for it. And it's going to be a part of our happily ever after, because we're going to put it all together, and we're going to be a better person and a more lovable person. And we're going to be able to love ourselves, because at least we're true and we're authentic. And that is worth a lot. So those are some of the things that I've learned, and some of the things I've been thinking about over the last month. I'm happy to be with you today, continuing this Lovin Sheila journey. It has been a journey, because just when you think you're doing great, you realize I've got some more work to do. But I hope you are here for the work. I'm here for the work. We're going to keep on doing it. We're going to keep learning together, keep growing together, and get to our happily ever after. If it kills us, but it's not going to kill us. It's just everything we go through is going to make us stronger. So we're going to get to our happily ever after. And I look forward to getting there with you. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Until then, take care of yourself. I'll see you soon. Bye now.